2025. But before we look at 2025, I want to start this afternoon by looking slightly backwards towards the January equal consideration deadline. So I've got some statistics that I've pulled out from the deadline, which was the 31st of January for the 2024 cycle. Now, overall, the total amount of applicants we saw for the January deadline this year was 594,940. Now, from last year, that's actually just down by 0.3%. Overall, last year's amount of applications came through at 750,000. So it was the highest we've seen on record. So even with that slight dip, we're already seeing a huge amount of applications coming through overall where we've been year on year. From those total amount of applications that came through, it was 479,210 that were from the UK, and that's also slightly down by 0.5%. So what about the places that have seen some increase? Well, 316,850 18-year-olds applied for the January deadline this year, and that is up by 0.7%. That is actually the second highest number of UK 18-year-old applicants on record that have applied through UCAS. So that is quite a significant finding from this year's statistics. We've also seen a major decline in terms of mature applicants of 21 years and older. 65,450 applied in this particular cycle for the January deadline, which is down by 5.2% on last year. That's probably not something we weren't not expecting, because obviously during the pandemic we saw such a rise in applications from mature applicants, and that's just starting to come down to those pre-pandemic levels that we had around 2019. So that's nothing too much out of the blue that we'd expect to see. The other area where we've seen increase in applications is from the international applicants side of things. So 0.7% increase on last year. Our largest market still being China, with 28,600 applicants applying for the January deadline. That's up on 3% on last year. And the other area, so another input we've had from another country is Turkey. And we saw a 37% rise in applications from Turkey in this particular cycle, with a total of 2,600. So really the two main drivers there, 18-year-old applications increasing and internationally for this particular cycle. And just to highlight on the next slide, as we go through, just looking at some of those subjects that are in demand on the applications that are coming through. So we have, first of all, engineering and technology being 10% up in applications that are being sent through to UCAS for the January deadline. So that's where we have seen some significant growth. Mathematical sciences and computing also up by 7%. At the other end, education and teaching, medicine and dentistry, and psychology were all down by 6% on last year. I think that certainly with medicine courses, that may not be too much of a surprise. Again, seeing such a huge influx of applications during the pandemic, what we would call the Chris Whitty effect. So coming down by 6% into the 2024 cycle, again, we're not surprised from where we were with those highs a few years ago. But that's where we are in terms of subject applications that have come through in demand for this cycle. So that's 2024. We now look towards 2025 and some of the updates that I'm going to confirm for you. But really just a good point to, I guess it's a bit of a celebration point for us this week, because everything goes live over the next week. Yesterday was the advisor portal opening for 2025, so we're all ready to go. And a week later, on the 14th of May, is when the application will go live for 2025 for students to start filling that in. So we're already set to go for 2025, but don't forget, as we have the overlap with applications from 2024, we still set the 3rd of September as the first date that students can send their application through to us. So plenty of time to do that discovery research stage, as we'll look at some advice and help with that shortly. The two key main deadlines to be aware of for this cycle: the early deadline, the 15th of October, for medicine, veterinary, dentistry, and courses at Oxford or Cambridge. So applications would have to be in by that deadline to apply to those courses. For everything else, it's the 29th of January as the equal consideration deadline. Always good to check those deadlines on our course search when you're supporting students, just to double check, but those will be their deadlines to be on time in this cycle. I've had a few questions even yesterday when I was out and about speaking to teachers and advisors around the late application date. Now, for this cycle for 2024, it's still the 30th of June, as it will be for 2025. So if you're supporting anybody that wants to make a late application, that is always possible in each cycle. My main piece of advice is that they speak to the university or college that they're interested in applying to with a late application, making sure they get that all clear that they're able to do so, but they are able to send a late application up until the 30th of June. But we do want to focus on getting them through for those on-time deadlines to absolutely get a decision. So with plenty of time to start researching and making an application, where do students go? Well, we're hoping they'll be going straight into register and have a play around with their own UCAS Hub account. Now, in terms of the UCAS Hub, over the last year, we've had a bit of a change in design. So UCAS Hub 2.0, so to speak. And this is what they'll be met with once they've gone through that initial registration and start filling in details of the application. From next week, on the 14th of May, they'll get that banner at the top of the page saying that they can start their application for 2025. But anybody that you're supporting, even now looking to apply for next year, for September or October, they can already register and start using some of the advice and guidance and tools in the UCAS Hub to support their decision making on where they want to go. And this means even going back down to year 9s and 10s or the younger age, it's really a good thing to promote them registering for the hub now, and obviously having that registration to come back into UCAS at that time that they need to apply. There's lots of tools and advice on here that can start helping them think where it is they want to go and making those key decisions in that research phase. Once they've registered and they start coming into the UCAS Hub, they'll also have these brilliant apps or widgets or tiles, whichever word that you want to use. I like to kind of go with apps because it's that kind of smartphone idea where you've got your different apps of information in one particular place. So if they were to register now and tell us where they live, or even start to look at some courses that interest them from the course search that's live for 2025, they can start seeing events that are happening in their area where they live, or events that are being run or open days through the universities and colleges that they're interested in. They may even want to get some information and guidance from professionals at universities or students who have graduated, and they can watch our Hub Live studio recordings that we've done with those professionals to support decision making. The one last thing that I'd really promote to your students at this moment in time, where they're starting to get their thoughts together over what they want to do for 2025, is to use the careers quiz. And absolutely, you can trial this yourself with your own dummy application in the hub. You can go in and answer the 30 questions in the careers quiz. And what it does is it understands a student's personality traits from their answers and suggests some options that they may want to think about going forward from their answers. Really is very interesting to see what outcomes are found by doing that. Do have a look at those tools and suggest them going forward. I will look at some of our toolkits later on where you can explore some of these going forward to help with that research phase. But I have some really exciting updates to tell you about in terms of the research stage of making an application through UCAS. And I'm really proud to say that with UniBuddy, again, almost like a 2.0 version or a revamp with UniBuddy has begun for the UCAS Hub for this cycle. I mean, to give you some statistics and some information we've had from students, 78% of prospective students have said to us that they want to connect with university students when making a decision. It really is something that's important to them to actually ask those questions. And remember, with UniBuddy, they can ask these questions whenever they want to. They've got the picture on the screen now on the right hand side is a smartphone view as well as the desktop version. So if they're out having a coffee with their friends or perhaps later in the evening and something comes to their mind, they can contact over 4,900 ambassadors from universities and colleges around the UK and get their questions answered. And that could be anything, exploring more about that course that they might join and some understanding the learning that they might be doing, to really asking a sort of intricate question about the place they could be studying in, something about the city or things that are going on there, to help again make those decisions between choosing one choice over the other. So it's a reliable source of finding out information and something that we knew students wanted. And we've just made it a much easier, streamlined version of how it was before, with plenty more people that can be accessible from different universities and colleges. So that's in the UCAS Hub. Please do suggest that to students to use. Our next update is our collaboration work that we've done with a company called SpringPod. So choosing what and where to study and to work are life-changing decisions for students. And that's why that collaboration we've made with SpringPod is so important. Their mission is to help young people aged 13 and over to secure their dream career or even or their course, essentially, by helping them to gain high quality virtual experiences of sample university courses or subjects or even work experience. So the main idea here is try before you apply. So a student can have that experience of what it would be like to learn that particular university course or have that work experience happen over a 3 or 4 year course experience. That try before you apply is really important because they're signing up for a long period of their life around a course. These are big key decision making periods in their life that they're going to be going through. And what they have are these subject spotlights, which will be available on the UCAS Hub, those experiences that they can join and understand what it would be like to go on to study at university or college. Again, something that we're really proud to bring into the hub to help with decision making and really understanding what it would be like to go to university or college. They can be accessed as those spotlight experiences through the UCAS Hub. So work experience, subject information, just ways of understanding all that learning that could be taking place later on. That's all accessible in the UCAS Hub. And finally, coming shortly in the next few weeks, we will send an update to when this is live, aligning with the application going live. In our course search, there will be historic entry grade data for lots of different courses available. So when you're searching, what we used to have, this was accessible in the advisor portal previously, but students have told us that this information will be really helpful, again, to inform them to find out that information on where it is they want to go. So what we'll have from this cycle onwards is the opportunity for students to be able to search and see what grades were accepted for entry for those courses that they're looking at. And that goes back over a 5-year period. So that will show in the course search. When you're searching for a particular course, you'll be able to see what was looked at as entry grades data for that course over the last 5 years. That's going to be moved from where it was in the advisor portal onto the UCAS course search. And again, like SpringPod, like UniBuddy, those key decision-making factors that can help narrowing down those 5 choices to the application. These are all things that can start to be used before diving straight in and making an application. So another thing that has been asked for and we've provided on the UCAS Hub. Now, to really help you support your students going through that research phase, something that you may already be aware of, but I think is fantastic, is the Student Hub activity option in the advisor portal. This is where you can ask your students to link up to you from the buzzword. So from yesterday, where we've set up for 2025, make sure you've got your buzzword ready, because when you've given that to your students and they've linked up to your registered centre through the advisor portal, you'll be able to see whether they have logged in to the hub or not. And those that haven't, you can identify them, suggest them doing so, making sure they've gone through that thorough time period of doing that research before going ahead and making their application. I think what I'm trying to make clear with this as we look towards the personal statement and reference later on is those changes we've made with those parts of the application is so that you have more time supporting students using the tools thinking about their research with 5 choices on their application. Growing applications coming through year on year as we go through, it is really important that that research is done. Perhaps in the future, it might not be as likely where they may not have 5 offers on their application. They may well still do, but at least at that point, if they got one offer, they're still absolutely passionate and wanting to go there. So that research is really important going forward. Now, one other fantastic area that we've really grown through UCAS is our work with apprenticeships. And we know there's an unprecedented demand for apprenticeship opportunities. In fact, nearly 3 in 5, 59% of young people in years 9 to 12 are considering an apprenticeship. We've also been told that 42% are choosing this route because they want to earn while they learn, and 34% want to learn new skills. So that comes into place, that thinking that whilst UCAS are now showcasing apprenticeships alongside traditional undergraduate degrees for the first time, which is a fantastic step forward to have that parity of choice for students in front of them. So from today, again, when you log into the UCAS Hub, students will be able to search for a particular subject, whether that's, let's take nursing, for example, and they'll be able to see if there are apprenticeship opportunities for nursing alongside those nursing degrees. So if you can see with those subjects that they're thinking about, they'll be able to explore the options in front of them in one place. So a fantastic development that we've put in place with apprenticeships. So do obviously suggest that when doing that research, first of all. And especially to help you with understanding with apprenticeships and your students, there are fantastic editable presentations that you can download and run with your students. There's one for parents that can be accessible, and obviously for yourselves that can be editable however you want to present that to them. There's also some brilliant videos that we've done for students around apprenticeships. So we've actually interviewed apprentices that have gone through those apprenticeships and help bring it all to life. So that might be something that you want to use to help with that understanding of what's out there. So lots of resources available in our apprenticeships area of ucas.com. So one final thing to highlight in terms of an update before we look at the application is our fantastic UCAS widget. So on your website, that you have maybe have information around applying to higher education, you are able to house our UCAS widget on there. So on your school or college website, or even a virtual learning environment. And that basically links students and parents to the relevant pages on ucas.com to what you're perhaps putting as information on your website. It's that nice intuitive navigation from one place to another, very simply taking them through with those links that are provided. The content that's going to be available through these links is going to be reviewed regularly throughout the cycle so that it's up to date and that it's relevant at the right point, making sure the information is needed when it's needed. If you want to find out more, please do go to ucas.com/widget. As I say, it's something that's really fantastic to help with that further information and guidance. So that's the UCAS widget. So we move from the discovery phase, looking at now the application and what's new for 2025 that students need to be aware of. Well, first of all, we've got a brand new section of the application this year, but it doesn't really reinvent the wheel in terms of what's being asked, because this is all about the address of the student and a slight address history. So with this brand new section, essentially it's been put together because it will help universities and colleges ensure that a student is paying the correct fees when they're applying. They are essentially, what we've been asked is that students enter their addresses that they've been living at since the 1st of September 2022 to the present day. Now, that may just be one address, and that could just be their home address where they are now, but it could be that there's more than one address that needs to be entered, and that's where they would do that, and they can add more than one. If they do add more than one, they're just literally listing which is their permanent address, and which are obviously temporary. So they can select that from the list there. The other thing to be aware of is we've added some additional fields for international address format to, again, really get that clear, accurate data for universities and colleges when they're entering address on here. So just some extra information that's added. So not too much new. It's still asking for an address, but that's significantly why it's in its own area to really help with universities and colleges making that right decision over the correct fee status. So where you live section is in. So when you come in to start filling in the application and you have those tiles, where you live sits there on the top right-hand corner. But where we've added that in, we have removed the English language skills box that was there before. That section asked, is English your first language? That has now been removed, and that question has been removed. There was another couple of things in that section, but we've just moved it to the education section, which we'll look at shortly. So where you live is in, English language skills is out. We move on to the education section. So what we've done with the education section, and we have done some work with this, is really trying to focus on the user journey through the application and making some improvements that will hopefully make this much more intuitive and streamlined experience, as it says at the top there. And one of the things that we've done first of all is to make it really clear what this section was all about. So of all the sections of the application, this is one area which we felt that at the top we needed to say that this is where a student would need to enter their secondary education and qualifications in this section. So making that nice and clear from the start. So one of the, I think this is absolutely fantastic. If a student is linking to you as a registered centre through UCAS, when they come to the education section, they're ultimately being asked to add you again as their place of study to then enter their qualifications they've done with you. They've now got an option to pre-populate your school, college, or centre that they've linked to from the buzzword into the education section. So they can tick a box, say, yes, it's the same place as the person is linked to from the buzzword, and that drops that information in straight away. So we know that's definitely accurate because it links up to the buzzword information as you as a centre, and then off they go. They can start entering their qualifications underneath it. We've also added some, again, additional fields for when students enter their school, college, or centre manually. Again, making sure that the data is accurate, that's being received by a university or college, so they can enter that in when they're filling in the education section. And on top of that, we've added some additional questions when they're entering a place where they've studied, including a study mode. Lots of courses are being done online, so we felt it was important to say, as a student, if you have been studying in person or have done that course online. So it makes that nice and clear now. A university will come in and they'll say, okay, that's been done between this period of time, but they've actually done that online. So it makes that nice and clear. The final thing that we've added is the attendance type. This happens quite regularly where a student may come in to, for example, take do a retake at a school or college again later on. But how they put it on the application is they put a start and end date, perhaps between June, and put the qualification as pending, making that read to a university or college that they've gone into a centre and more than likely done a qualification retake within that time. But this is just a nice, easy indicator to say they have just taken an exam only, so they can select that option within that month of going to that centre. We've also removed the sandwich option when entering a place of study as well, being that that's not needed anymore. So just be aware of that. So what has been removed with the education section? You may be aware of the question that asks, please state the highest level of qualification you expect to have before you start your course. Being that they're entering their qualification history, we've obviously found, from feedback as well, again, this question wasn't required going forward, so we have removed that question now, so you won't see that anymore in the education section. And earlier, where I said about the English language skills, there was a couple of questions in there around the TOEFL and IELTS numbers. They have been removed. They have been removed from that section and moved to the education section now. So if anyone needs to enter those certificate numbers, they can enter them into the education section. Finally, just to make you aware in terms of the nationality detail section, anyone you're supporting that needs to enter that further detail around their nationality, and particular questions that are being asked that determines an applicant's fee status. But we've actually had additional questions that have been asked of university and college for us to enter here, again, to help them to determine that status of the student. So do you need to study, do you need a student visa to study in UK? There's a don't know answer. There's an option to enter the start and end date of a study that's completed if they've been in the UK before. So just additional questions there that if a student's being asked to enter on the application, they can put in, and that helps with the further information that might be sent out as a form from the university to find out more about the student, but just putting it into our application now instead. And that all helps to determine that fee status. So just some additional questions to be aware of there. So with those updates I've gone through, if you want to look at a bit more around those and find out some more information, we did run them through in our March and April Advisor Live updates that you can watch back. But I've just highlighted some of the ones we've done recently and going forward. So that was done recently on the 2nd of May, our Advisor Live, which really looked at confirmation and clearing in a lot more detail. So if you want to look at that and find out a bit more information, that's where you need to go. And you can watch that back or book forward onto any sessions we've got around personal statement guidance, our June update, and again, looking at preparing for results day. So you can watch those live and add any questions as they happen, or watch them back once they've been recorded. Please do have a look at those later on if you wanted to do that. So we move on to the personal statements, and where there's lots of talk in the sector and questions around the personal statement. I think the first thing to say about the personal statement is that it's absolutely valid. That's the clear message we have from the students. It is valued. It's always been really, it's an area where they get to use their own voice in the application, and they still believe that, and that's fantastic. It gives them the opportunity to showcase their potential outside of their academic achievements, and to really advocate for that chosen course that they want to do. I've got some statistics really around the personal statement to share. 89% of students actually said to us they feel the purpose of the statement is clear. So that's fantastic, and we know that they value it as part of the application. But the one thing that really hit home with us when we were reevaluating how it worked on the application was 83% of students said they found the process stressful. Now, in terms of they come to the application at the moment with that empty box asking for 4,000 characters, we took that on board, that statistic, and really, as we get to references in a minute, which we will do and talk over, we've kind of gone back to statements and think, could this be a similar approach that we look at? And we've done a lot of research with students, teachers and advisors and providers around the personal statement. It's going to be reformed and definitely not completely removed. And what we've looked at through thorough research is that we are going to move to a scaffold approach of 3 distinct sections and three questions essentially that will be asked of students when they come to the personal statement. That will be built around motivation for the course, preparedness for the course, and preparation through other experiences. The wording of those 3 questions and how that will be put together is still being decided at the moment, so I can't share that with you today, but that will be confirmed in June. There will be an advisor pack that will be sent out. It'll be confirmed via the bulletins if you're signed out, and also accessible on UCAS.com. And that will confirm the questions that are being asked for those 3 sections, along with a briefing to confirm what's happening with personal statements, and also the resources required, the support wrapper for yourselves to help your students ready for the 2026 cycle. So where we're saying for 2026, nothing is changing for 2025. So do be aware of that. The last thing to say with it is that this will go hand in hand with the work we're doing with providers on the reform too. So they'll be aware of everything that we're doing, and it will be 4,000 characters in total still, but that will be split flexibly over those 3 particular sections of the personal statement. Like I say, a lot more information coming shortly, but hopefully that just explains a little bit about what we're going to be looking at as we launch that in June coming shortly. With that in mind and a free section approach, we'll just actually, before we do look at references, I just remembered I want to just mention 2025 because it's still really important to support those students using the process as we have for personal statements now. And this is really just a point to highlight how important it is to think about those super curricular activities that are really going to drive applications going forward. As always, as we look at students applying, admission staff may be looking at 10 applications that all have the same predicted grades, for example, and those that they're looking to achieve. The evidence is what will really help excel and strengthen an application over those others around them. So it is a point now where they can start to jot down the evidence they've done already, or those things that they're going to be looking to do, such as work experience and what they've picked up from doing that, perhaps in person, maybe just the emotional impact of doing things and learning things as well as online. Things that can be picked up online from perhaps TED Talks or vlogs, or even from those designers or influencers online that may have written an article and they found out some higher learning from doing so. Even from UCAS exhibitions or open days, a conversation that might have been started with a professional in admissions can lead to the initiative of doing that higher text learning, or even trialing some creative software, for example, and understanding what it would be like to be on that course earlier. Don't forget, 20% of a personal statement can still talk about the extracurricular. So if somebody's part of a team or a club and there's different skills and knowledge that they're using in that capacity, that's still important to talk about. But that's where I would be focusing for 2025. And this will still feed into the new system when we change over, more around the third section, preparation through other experiences. But it's important to talk about these things to really excel the personal statement going further and that higher learning that they may be doing above their qualifications they're taking at the moment. And a good way of putting that together to start thinking about the statement is to either use our personal statement builder in the UCAS Hub, where those questions, why are you applying for your chosen course? Why does the subject interest you? Why do you think you're suitable for the course? Answers to those sorts of questions will really help to start those opening paragraphs of the statement. So they can start to draft those answers and have that to one side when they open perhaps a Word document and start piece that together. And if they do just list those bits of evidence that they've done already or those that they're looking to do, they can form different paragraphs of their statement to give that further information and detail of what they've been thinking and learning of that higher level based around the subject they're interested in doing at university or college. We've also know, because the UCAS Hub is a personalization tool, when we're aware of what a student wants to go on and study, we'll suggest personal statement builders guides to them. So writing a personal statement for chemistry, if that's what they want to do, there are tips and guidance around writing a personal statement for that particular subject. So those guides can really help with their writing for that. So that's where I would be heading, really focusing on that evidence at this point, starting to jot it down, and that will start forming the bulk of their application, alongside obviously explaining, really why it is that they've chosen that course over there and that subject over their other subjects they're doing at the moment. So that leads us on nicely to references, and that link in from where we're looking at a three-section approach for personal statements. That is where we are now with references. But before I just go over that three-section approach, just to confirm, first of all, our resources for references have been updating over the last year. So when we launched the new process for references, it wasn't a case of us adding those resources on ucas.com, leaving them to go stale and not changing them. Even yesterday, when I was out and doing a conference, I'm picking up questions around the reference, and we do feed these back and update our FAQs for each section of the reference. So at any point, if you have a question or something you want to look at, please do go to our advisors part of the website. If you're new to this process and need to learn, or passing this on to your colleagues, there's a brilliant presentation you can download, video updates from providers and from us in terms of some more information you need to know, Or if you'd rather do interactive e-learning way of understanding a process, we have a brilliant reference course on our professional development platform. It's free to enroll on our courses on there, and you can follow that through with different bite-sized chunks of learning to find out more. So lots of resources to help you with references. Obviously, I know that's a big part of your support with applications through the advisor portal if you're doing it that way. So that leads me on to just talk about the reference at this point and those three particular sections. Just first of all to say, either through the advisor portal, that for that first section, but don't forget with the first section independently, the reference when you come to writing that first section, if any of you are going through that way of doing references, the difference is you're providing an overview of your relationship with that person that's asking you to write a reference. So maybe it could be an ex-student coming back to you and asking to do that independently, just a bit more information in terms of their study with you when they were at the school, college or centre. But essentially the first section, and it is mandatory, is to contextualize the education experience of that student at your school, college or centre. And don't forget, with the advisor portal just going live just yesterday for 2025, to go into centre management and make sure that your template text for that first section is up to date and ready to go. Because the information in section 1 is going to be very similar for all students that you're completing a reference for. It could be information that's where their studies might have been affected. It could be damage to buildings, change of staff over the last year. So things that are going to affect all students. You could give information about how you predict grades, or if you don't predict grades, why that is the case, so that universities and colleges understand. Just information and maybe even around the provision of subjects that they had to study from and choose from when they studied for your school, college or centre. So that is that general text that's put in there for all students when you're completing their reference. So you can put the text into your template, and then when you're doing a reference, just drop it straight in, and that first section is mandatory. The key thing to get across then with section 2 and 3, just to remember, they aren't compulsory. And we've made this change so that information can be pinpointed by universities and colleges to make that easier to identify it. With section 2, if applicable, you are able to enter further information about an extenuating circumstance for the student. I think the main thing with that second section, if you've had well, you would need to have a conversation in terms of the further information that you're going to give about their extenuating circumstance. If they give you the get-go to do that and to give that further detail, whether about a disability, if they've been through bereavement to a family member or friend, a chronic illness, for example, what you could be doing in there is really suggesting to a university or college the support that's already in place for them where they are learning now, to see whether they could implement the same support if that student joined the university or college. As I say, a conversation would need to happen first of all. They do have the more about you section to give that further information. They may include it in their personal statement, but this is your chance to give that further detail to really make sure that their next education experience going forward can be put together, implementing the same support measures that you have now. So that's your sort of role with that second section. It's not going to be it's not compulsory. It's not needed for every student, but that's something you need to be thinking about when writing a reference. With section 3, you're able to outline that further supportive information specific to the student you're writing a reference for. It's not going to be needed, as I say, it's not a compulsory section, but I think with this particular third section, you know your students best, and you may find that there is 1 or 2 lines or something that you want to include for every student you're writing a reference for. This section shouldn't become that full big block of text as the reference was before. It needs to be short, concise, 1 or 2 lines of information that's provided. It could be some lines or information from another teacher or tutor. It could be that they are the best in their cohort in a particular subject. It could be something that they've achieved through work experience that you want to make clear. but it should be something that the university and college can pinpoint and see that information, and really thinking that you want to get across to those when they come to look at the application. So lots of FAQs around each of these sections for further advice. Please do look through them if you have any further questions, but just a bit of an overall there of understanding when you come to write references for this cycle. And just remember with the references, we've still got a third of the 2024 cycle to go. So that means there won't be any technical changes for 2025 because of that, because we're still gathering our feedback, and we will be sending out an end of survey cycle in the autumn to all teachers and advisors to make sure this new reference process is working well, getting that feedback, making sure if there's any changes we need to do going forward, that can be looked into. But because that's going to happen at the end of the cycle, nothing will be changed for 2025 in terms of the reference. The areas that we will look at is obviously continual change to the information and in guidance on ucas.com. So further questions, any information that we get, we will add further on there to help you and with resources when completing a reference. We'll also be developing and issuing that best practice guidance for providers to resolve some of those inconsistencies that have been surfaced through the new structure. And we will share that with all teachers and advisors, so there's that full transparency of expectations for references. So yeah, we'll be looking at that as we go forward. So finally, I'm just going to finish with a look at the advisor portal and lots of brilliant updates that are coming forward with the advisor portal, starting with the UCAS Outreach Connection service. Now, this has actually been live since the turn of the year, but first of all, for providers and third-party outreach providers. And what they've been able to do is to add and actually manage their own opportunities and activities available for disadvantaged and underrepresented students. That data they're making available of those opportunities will feed into the advisor portal. Now, this isn't live just yet. It will be available shortly over the next month. We'll make that available from our bulletins and on the advisor part of our website. But the main idea of doing this is so that it's a time-saving tool to look through those opportunities and identify for any of those students that would you think relevant to do those. You could suggest for them looking at, essentially, because on the application you have the extra activities section where they can enter these in. You'll be able to search through what's available at each university or college, suggest that to the student, and they could look into doing those and add into their extra activities part of their application. So that will be a new tile in the advisor portal called the Outreach Connection Service for those students who need to be looked at to help them with those opportunities. You can then identify and suggest that to them, and that will be coming live shortly. So the advisor portal went live yesterday for 2025. Really excited for another cycle going forward. And whether you have logged in for 2025 on the portal or not, just to let you know of some changes first of all. When you do log in and set up through Centre Management for 2025, you'll be met with a new tick box. Now, that tick box forms part of your terms of service with UCAS. So whoever's setting up your centre for 2025, they would need to click that and complete the acknowledgement. That forms alongside the advisor guide a part of your agreement with UCAS. So we're asking that to be ticked first of all through that confirmation when setting up as a centre for 2025. And just to remind with that, the advisor guide is live for 2025. You can access that, and that will give you all the information about your roles and responsibility as a registered centre, guidance and information for the entire cycle. So do download it or print it off, however you want to do that. But that'll give you that information that you need to know, and having access to that, clicking that tick box sets you up for 2025. That guide is part of our toolkit as well for this cycle, and there's lots of downloadable presentations you can access to look into further information around the application, the hub, the parents' evening presentation if you want to download that. Lots of support going forward where it's required. Now, the other area that we've taken time to review and look over is the current qualification shortlist. And it did highlight a number of issues to us across the board that they weren't actually being fully utilized. That was alongside the fact that we had over 15,000 qualification amendment forms sent to us in 2023 requesting an update post submission. So we needed to address it, and we have made some updates to this particular area. So what we've done is we've introduced brand new qualification categories for students to pick from. So my plea really to you, and going back to this section, is to go into your qualification shortlist when you're accessing centre management in the advisor portal, checking through what legacy qualifications are showing there, what's been there previously, and making sure the absolute correct categories are showing for your students to choose from. Because going from these new categories we've put together, rehousing them under a different title, I mean, they're fairly similar, but it will really make it clearer when you select them. Those that you select for your centre, for students to choose from, when they click add qualification in the education section, they have that option at the bottom of the page that says provided by your school or college, and they'll see those qualifications they can choose from to add into their application. So a nice, streamlined, easy way of getting that onto their application with hopefully less errors or mistakes as we've seen previously before. So really good idea to review those short list of qualifications that you have for your centre in the advisor portal. So another fantastic area that we've added to the advisor portal, and really is a long awaited request we've had from lots of feedback, is adding a new column in the application management part of the advisor portal called resubmitted date. You had the date that it says first submitted, so that's where students submit their application to you, so pay and send it through, and you know when it's first submitted. However, when you're checking through an application and you've seen a spelling mistake in a statement or the wrong qualification result added, for example, and you've sent it back to them to edit, when they actually send it back to you again, that's what the resubmitted date is. So that actually confirms the date they've sent it back to you, so you know when that is going forward. So that's why we've added it. We had that feedback and we knew it was important to differentiate between the date it was first submitted and when it had been sent back again by that particular student. So you can see that information now in application management. We've also given you the option of being able to bulk download all of your applications. So in the past, it was a case of one by one, individually downloading all your applications as a PDF. And that could have been 100 or 200 different applications you needed to do. You can now click the three dots for all your applications and download them all as PDFs all together as a zip file. And if that is quite a few, we'll email you to tell you when it's done, and you'll have them all stored somewhere to access if you need to later on. So just a bulk download way of having all your applications safe in one place. And finally, another great thing that we've added from feedback that I've certainly heard over the last couple of years is when you're looking at the courses that your students are applying to look against perhaps the predicted grades, the qualifications that they have, the results that they have, you can go to the drop down for the choices they're applying to. And you can not only see the course entry requirements by clicking a link, so it will take you to the website and the course search and show you the entry requirements for that course they're applying to. So you can look at that compared to perhaps what they're predicted. It will also clearly tell you whether they need to take an admissions test to get onto that course or if an assessment's required. So helping you with preparation and being aware of what's needed to support that student for applying to those particular courses. Again, just a really intuitive way of and time efficient way of supporting your students going forward. So a nice link that's available for course entry requirements there in the advisor portal. So finally, just say going forward, if you need any further information, don't forget ucas.com/advisors has that information that you need in terms of resources. But to get any updates or information from us directly to you, please do sign up to our monthly newsletters. at ucas.com /advisor-updates. It means you get it straight to your inbox. I know you'll get lots of different emails and information, but it just means you can access it that way rather than having to just log in each time through the website as well. So please do sign up to those if you haven't already, along with accessing those live sessions we do and any sort of events, conferences, training sessions that we've got coming up, you can access in the same place. So any further support from today, don't forget we've got our UCAS advisor team available Monday to Friday on the phone number and email address showing on the screen. The team I'm working, our digital learning team that I'm part of, please don't forget to email on training@ucas.ac.uk if you want to ask me any further questions after today. And finally, a plug for our team, the e-learning courses that we have available that are free to enroll on. If you go to pdp.ucas.com, that's where you can enroll on those reference courses, personal statement, lots of areas of UCAS to get that further information and guidance. Absolutely have a look at those if you need some further support going forward. So thanks everyone for listening today. I know there's lots of information. If anyone has any further questions, I'll be more than happy to help. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ross. That was absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you've got any questions, please do put them in the chat. And we've got just over 5 minutes remaining.
Thank you.
I'll just give everyone a few minutes in case they're writing.
Sure. Oh, thank you both. Much appreciated.
So, thanks. Ross, there's a question that's come in. Are the apprenticeships that are being advertised degree apprenticeships or all apprenticeships?
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. That's a great question. They will be both that are shown there. So in terms of apprenticeships, having that side by side now with undergraduate degrees, the information with apprenticeships, students will be taken, if they look at a vacancy, through to the particular website of the employer to apply and look at that going forward. That can be degree apprenticeships. That information will be clear when they search, or apprenticeships in general. They don't work obviously in a cycle as the undergraduate system is, so they can become available at any point. So if they're looking now, it's always good to continually look whilst they're still making perhaps an application as an undergraduate application alongside that. But yes, both will be showing in terms of UCAS going forward. Is the process still the same for students that want to defer places? Thank you very much for that question. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So when a student fills in their application, they will have the option to put the start date for their choices. They will always have that option there of putting so for this cycle, it'll be 2026 that they'll get as an option to put as a start date. My advice when putting a deferred date to next year is for them to still check with the university or college around that, and they'll just fully confirm if they can make a decision on next year. But that is automatically given as an option when they select the choice onto their application. But yeah, 2025, you fill in the application, add your choice, and the date will be in there for 2026 if they're looking to defer now as well. Oh, thanks, Verity. Could you give some information on how, if the application process? Yeah, so as I was just saying before, with apprenticeships, what will happen, and if you go to our UCAS apprenticeship search on our website, you can enter your CV, house your CV there. But when you find a vacancy for an apprenticeship from an employer, you'll be taken through to their website to apply. The information in terms of the application process and what they need will be clear through us. It will be also on their website in terms of what they'll need to do next. There aren't any specific deadlines because those vacancies can become available from employers when they want to put that on our website at whatever point, essentially. And in terms of actually closing them or not, that's down to the employer that's running that. I think in most cases, when you're taken through to their website, there'll be a bit more clarity on that. But the main thing is now for us at the starting point with apprenticeships is to house that search there. So they've got that information in front of them, and then they're taken to that next stage to apply from starting at UCAS, if that makes sense. Thanks, Paula. Can you clarify the outreach connection service? Can they pick from a list? And that item goes into that. Yeah, thanks, Paula. So the outreach connection service, providers have been adding those. So if you think 380 universities and colleges around the UK themselves, if they've got an opportunity that's available for students to go on to, they've been able to add that to as data that comes through to the advisor portal for you as teachers and advisors to look through per university or college to make that available to underrepresented students, disadvantaged students. Those that you suggest, it wouldn't automatically go into their application. If they want to go and pick that up and do that, they can add it in to the extra activities. I think it's the main objective of it is if these opportunities are being made available, it's so that you know that they're there to be able to suggest to those students and helping them in terms of their route to higher education, so that they've got that opportunity out there that they can go and do, popping that on their application, getting them set up perhaps for higher education as well, and looking forward by doing that. There will be some more, clear detail when this goes live for teachers and advisors. But for now, it is just a case of waiting for that get-go when it's on the advisor portal. We're still onboarding that provider information at the moment as they update those opportunities for you to look through. Thanks, Sarah. If we can't find particular qualifications to add for our students to select, who shall we contact? Yeah, thank you very much. That's great. So there's certainly lots of different qualifications that we've added, and we have reviewed those for those categories. So hopefully those opportunities will be there. Don't forget that there's always the option for students to add qualifications manually. So they can select the option other to put that information in themselves. So when you're adding your shortlist, you could add other UK qualification as one of your options. So if you know there's some students where there isn't something so obvious, and one or two that have done something somewhere else or even internationally, you could have that option there. So there's always a way of them getting their qualification onto the application. But certainly in terms of feedback, if there's something that we've missed or there's something we need to know to make clear for you, do go with the contact on the screen there. If you contact advisor help at UCAS, we can look into that further for you. It's really important. We do appreciate your feedback around those areas. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. That's much appreciated. Lovely. Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. I really appreciate that as well. Any further questions? No problem if not.
Okay. I don't think there's any further questions. Thank you very much for everyone who attended. We hope you found it useful.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye now.
Bye.